Welcome back, everyone, to Wright Virtual Visits 3.0. My name is Heidi Ruley. I'm the Executive Director of the Unity Temple Restoration Foundation and one of the leaders of Wright Virtual Visits. We have quite a few changes this year, starting with a change in the leadership for Wright Virtual Visits. We had to say goodbye to Jeff Goodman, who's moving on to more different and exciting professional adventures. So we wish Jeff well, but we're so excited to welcome Anna Kaplan, who is one of our new leaders and is from Grey Cliff Estates in New York. So between Anna, myself, and Eric Rogers, we are going to be leading the efforts this year. We, of course, need to say a huge thank you to Forever Ready, which is the organization who's sponsoring our live stream this year and making our lives so much easier. So thank you so much, Forever Ready, for your generous contributions. We have a couple other new features for 2020, which includes a new theme for every month. This month, of course, being Fireplaces. So we're inviting our audiences to contribute photos or comments to our Facebook page before the event, and we will feature as many of those photos as we can at the end of the presentation. So thank you to those of you who've contributed some beautiful fireplace photos this time, and there were a few that came in before we could fit them into our slideshow, but thanks again for submitting those. Also, we will have questions and answers at the end of the presentation. So while they are presenting, please enter any comments or questions you might have into the comment section on the Facebook page, and we will get to as many as we can, either during or after the presentation. If you haven't already, please like our brand new Wright Virtual Visits Facebook page and keep an eye on it, as we will be posting new information of events coming up. And now I'd just like to go ahead and introduce our presenters for today. We have Kevin Rose and Marta Wojcik of Westcott House in Ohio, and also Amy Humbert with Ashley, who's behind the scenes in Fallingwater in Pennsylvania. Take it away, you guys.
Hi, everyone. We are so thrilled to be here. And yes. I'll be mostly behind the cameras.
And we're starting with Fallingwater, right?
Yes, I believe so.
Hi.
As Heidi mentioned, my name is Amy Humbert, and I manage the school programs and outreach at Fallingwater. I am very excited to be able to be with you here this afternoon. We have a great fire going behind us. And the first thing that I would want to do is just cover the basic dates and history of Fallingwater. So if we could pull up the image of Fallingwater, and the classic shot taken from the view. And basic dates are that Frank Lloyd Wright was commissioned to design Fallingwater in 1935 for the Edgar Kaufman family of Pittsburgh. They were the owners of Kaufman Department Store. And Fallingwater was going to be a vacation home for them. So it was not a home that they were going to live in 7 days a week. This was going to be their getaway from Pittsburgh. There are two buildings on the site. You are, of course, seeing the main house, which was built directly over a waterfall that the family loved, finished in 1937. And there was also a guest house addition added later in 1939. The family donated Fallingwater to the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy in 1963, and a tour program began in 1964. So with that, that gives you a little bit of basic history about the house. And what I would like to do now is show you just a bit of the living room and a little bit of where the fireplace is located here within the living room. Tricky part about that is I'm going to be filming using the laptop. So just bear with me here as I kind of move that around. Okay. So the first floor of the main living room, the first floor of Fallingwater is about 1,800 square feet, and it is an open plan design. The Kaufmans had talked with Wright about wanting a space that they could entertain both large and small groups of people. I know I've personally seen over 100 people here on the first floor. There are built-in couches for conversation. There are also small movable pieces of furniture that the Kaufmans could move and rearrange to create different conversation areas. There is a dining room located actually right near the fireplace. The fireplace is located on what would be more the west side of the building. And the dining room is located just past that, more on the north side, kind of the back side of the building. The fireplace is actually built on top of a large boulder that the house was constructed around. You can perhaps see that boulder coming up through the floor, and it actually forms the hearth. Mr. Wright had talked about wanting to let that be part of the design. And Edgar Kaufman Sr. had suggested that rather than cut the boulder level with the rest of the living room floor, that they let the boulder come up above it. So it is just a bit higher than the remaining floor of the living room. It is the same kind of stone that the house is constructed out of, which is a Pottsville sandstone. And that's the same kind of stone you would also find on the grounds at Fallingwater. And if you're wondering about the cast iron kettle that hangs on the side, that large red ball, Mr. Wright wanted that to be a focal point that would grab people's attention. It would be something that people would notice as they came into the room. And he also felt that when the Kaufmans entertained, they could swing that kettle then over the fire. So it has a handle that you can pull it around. It'll swing directly over the hearth. They could heat in it. There is some discussion about perhaps it was a little difficult to get the wine warm in any quick amount of time. So there's always been some legends that they may have just heated the wine in the kitchen and poured it into the kettle to serve out of it. It does hold quite a lot. It'll hold roughly about 8 gallons actually of wine that they could serve out of that kettle. There's a little spigot there in the front that you can serve out of. Now, with that brief introduction about Fallingwater's history and showing you the living room and the fireplace, I want to throw over to the Westcott house and let them take over from here.
Good, thanks, Amy. So here we are in literally the middle of a very symmetrical design here at the Westcott house. Before I get into that, I want to talk a little, like you did, about the history of the property. So a lot of publications date the origin of this design as early as 1904 and 1905. We now believe, or at least we have records, that the house dates early design work to 1906. Wright designed an entire property for the Westcotts that they didn't actually build. That design, as well as the finished design, were both included in the Wasmuth portfolio. This design was then under construction from 1907 to 1908. It's the oldest prairie-style house by Wright in the state of Ohio, and one of those early houses that he's experimenting with these ideas that he'd been playing around with since the early part of that decade. In many ways, the open floor plan of this part of the house, one large room, 60 feet wide, 60 feet long, 20 feet wide at its widest point, is a play on his early prairie school designs that he published in Ladies' Home Journal in 1901. If you look at those, and maybe we can go over and actually look at that plan, you can see that it's just a mirror image of it. The dining room's on one side, the library's on the other, but other than that, it's a very similar design. Here we have that. We thankfully were able to get a copy of that magazine. Again, 1901. It's interesting. It's Ladies' Home Journal. Its main competitor in the United States was Woman's Home Companion, and they actually bought this lot from the owner of Woman's Home Companion magazine. So it kind of makes us think they didn't subscribe to this because their good friend owned the competing magazine, but you never really know. So you, again, have one large open space that is in the very center, anchored by the fireplace. We don't have time to go into the importance of the fire in Wright's career. We all know both the ways that fire played in his life, both tragically and symbolically as the center of a home. There's some great essays out there, including one by the holder of our camera today, Marta Vujicic, and a book, the essay appropriately just titled Fire, looking at Wright's work. But here at Westcott House, it does literally anchor the home. And unlike the publication from 1901, Wright adds these inglenook benches. And then we know that the family at the end of the inglenook benches had a Stickley 171 settee. We have a replica of that 171 settee here in the place today, creating this cozy little space around the fire where the family can spend time, symbolically that center of the home. One of the things that people often notice of the fireplace at Westcott House is, of course, its horizontal nature, right? This is a prairie house. This is a Wright house. This is what Wright is doing. And the use of the Roman brick. The Roman brick was really brought to the United States and began to be used in the late Victorian period, most prominently by Stanford White in the late 1880s. What's interesting with this brick is it's not actually a true Roman brick defined by American construction standards in that period. It's a little bit shorter, it's a little bit wider, which might hint that it was a local producer. We've actually been looking into this. We know that the Martin House bricks and some of the bricks in other houses are that more standard 12-inch long, 1.5 inches tall, where this is a little bit different proportions. But like a classic Wrightian design, the vertical is raked flat, or not raked flat, I should say, left flat, and then the horizontal is raked back. And the vertical is also used a slightly darker mortar, with the idea that when you look at it, you see bands of horizontal lines down the structure. This is a house that is well over 100 years old, right? So it's aged a bit, so you don't get quite that same technique today because of the patina that's left on the brick. It was probably much more dramatic in the early years when the family moved in 1908. So with that, I'll hand it back over to Fallingwater. I believe we're going to talk some about other ways of heating the house.
Sure, so thank you. We get a lot of questions about was the main heating source fireplaces, and no. When the Kaufmans talked with Wright in the beginning, they had expressed that they wanted to come to Fallingwater during the winter occasionally, and so they definitely wanted central heat. So what we have at Fallingwater is an oil-fired boiler. We have a small basement. It's located just underneath the fireplace behind me and underneath the kitchen of the main home. And we have a boiler there. And then for radiators, Wright certainly could have left them exposed in the house, but he really didn't like the look of them. So he designed the furniture to actually fit over the radiators. And I'm going to see if I can show you one of them here. Take just a second till I get the laptop unplugged. All right, and Ashley, I might need your help in letting me know if I've got this positioned correctly. So the radiator actually has a wood case completely built around it. And that's what he's done throughout the house. And so here on the first floor, we actually have radiators all around the perimeter of this room. So directly behind the couches, there are radiators, but the furniture covers and conceals them completely, so they're not in view. We do occasionally get questions about what the temperature is like inside this space. Now, certainly the Kaufman family would have had the heat up maybe a little bit higher than we do today, but I believe it's in the mid-20s here today, maybe 30s, maybe low 30s. And I was just checking the thermometer before we started, and the first floor was about 56 degrees. Over here near the fire, it's actually quite cozy. And when you see Fallingwater on tour, we generally don't have furniture here in front of it just because it's too difficult with moving people around the space. But in almost all of the photographs that we see of Fallingwater, the Kaufmans generally had chairs pulled up. And this was a cozy place to sit. So I'll throw back to you at the Westcott house.
Good, well, thanks. I'll say I'm envious of the fire burning in a fireplace. One of the more powerful experiences I've ever had in any museum was at Great Cliff when we were going through when the restoration was still underway. We were there for a Frank Lloyd Wright Building Conservancy conference. and the fire was burning, and that sense inside the home. There's an additional, the phenomenology of feeling that fire while you're inside the home is more powerful than any words that a docent can speak. And unfortunately, there was the decision to close up the fireplaces here. Maybe someday that will be changed, so we can't burn wood in our fireplaces currently. So I'm really, really envious. But how we heat the house today is the same way the Westcotts heated it, but with a slightly more advanced system behind it. So surrounding the house, and Marty, if you want to follow me over here, the walls bump out below the windows, the casement style windows that move around the house. By the way, Wright designed storm windows on them originally, which really helps keep some of that cold air out. That's a big part of the process of heating, right? Keeping the cold out. And then there's these grills, and the Wright bumped the structure out to hide the radiators. And we'll walk over through the dining room because you can get a better sense of them actually there. And it gives you a little bit of a chance to see the amazing Frank Lloyd Wright designed dining table. But here you get a really good sense in part because we get that nice light coming in off this west facade right now. But you see they're warm. And then there's these little doors that hide radiators back here. So there was a major merger to create what today we know as the American Radiator Company. And one of those companies that merged was based here in Springfield called the Marshfield Steel Company. And so they started producing American radiators after that merger. And so we believe these radiators were actually produced right here in Springfield, Ohio by one of the local plants. But again, they're Victorian design. You'll see them everywhere, right? They have that scroll work. They're definitely not Wrightian. They're not the type of thing Wright wanted. So by enclosing them in the wall, you feel the heat come out. There are cold air returns, so to speak, below that allow the air to circulate through, to pull across the floor, to get warmed up, and then to pull out, right? It's not like a forced air system. You don't necessarily feel that, but with them surrounding the outside perimeter walls, they counter the cold of the windows, and they are able to keep the house quite warm. So today, there's still hot water radiators. There's still the original radiators, but today we have an advanced geothermal system that is powering them. So we're not going to go into the basement today, so you'd see our mess of where we store everything. But there's a huge geothermal system down there that has, I think, vertical pipes buried in the backyard. I saw our friends at the Glessner House are installing the geothermal right now, and they're actually going to be giving a talk this week in Chicago on their new geothermal system. More and more museums are putting them in because they work so well on keeping a good temperature at a fairly low cost for fairly large homes. So Fallingwater, I'll send it back to you.
Thank you. It's really interesting to see your radiators because they look rather similar to the way ours do here at Fallingwater, and certainly have the furniture built out around them is also very similar. One more comment about the boiler system that we have here. When I first started in the mid-'80s, and I would say probably up until the mid-'90s, we still had the original boiler that had been installed in the house in 1937. It was enormous. It took up most of the space of the little room in the basement area. And I think that boiler went sometime in the mid-'90s. And since then, I believe we've replaced it 2 more times. But interestingly, that original one lasted that long. Okay, so we have several fireplaces at Fallingwater because most of the bedrooms upstairs have fireplaces as well. The chimney directly behind me has a separate flue for every single fireplace. And what I'd like to do now is have you pull up, there's an image of the master bedroom fireplace drawing that I'd like to show. And, oh, I'm sorry, it's a photo. And this is a great photo of a beautiful fireplace. Edgar Chappell, Wright's apprentice, talked about being on site and doing some of the detailed drawings for this fireplace. Those huge ledges of stone very much remind us of the ledges of rock that actually create the waterfall. There is a niche or a niche there right atop that ledge where there's a sculpture which the Kaufmans had placed. We believe they did ask for that little space to be created. I don't know if it was for this specific very specific sculpture. I'm not sure what year they purchased it. It is Austrian. They purchased it in Europe. But this was Fireplaces actually in Lillian Kaufman's bedroom, or what we also call the master bedroom of the house. And at this point, I believe we're going to go to questions and answers. Is that correct?
Yes, actually, I have a quick question for the Westcott house from Lucy Edwards. She wants to know, does the wood around the radiator suffer from the heat? Actually, can you say that again? It was a little bit muted there.
Okay. It does not. The heat is quite mild. It's also oak, so it's a wood that is a really stable wood. So you don't see really an issue at all as you look around in those areas. You would think, I mean, because there are some woods or stains that definitely, with that amount of heat, you can see some deterioration. But there is none, thankfully.
Thank you. And did either of you have any? Are you moving on to the next segment, or are you ready for some more questions right now?
Well, one of the things we wanted to talk about, Heidi, was the flue structure. And could you pull up that image of the 1907 blueprints for us? Okay. So as you can see, the flue is not straight up. It actually makes a turn. I always say kind of hobbit-like in those homes, these kind of playful ideas. So if you were to look at this fireplace, it has this C shape as it moves around. And if we want to walk upstairs real quick, you following, Marta? You can get a sense. It's also a good shot for people to be able to see our beautiful skylight. So where I am now is directly above that fireplace. So both of these doors are the center of the home. The fireplace is underneath us, and the flue actually moves around this doorway and then rejoins up above in just a common red brick, right? That's what the main flue structure is made out of. Roman brick is a decorative brick. Actually, in this period, they were debating whether it's even a brick mason's job or whether it's a tile setter's job to work in Roman brick, because it's not a real brick necessarily. It's not a structural brick. So that flue goes back up, it joins there, and it exits the house. So if you were to look at the front of this house, you see one central fireplace leave the home, which is something Wright believes strongly in, at least in this period. In his prairie-style houses, they'll often have one fireplace and everything feeds into that, so you'll have multiple flues going through one large chimney, rather than a Victorian house like a Queen Anne house where you might see 6 chimneys exiting the top of the house.
Do you want to show that?
Oh yeah, we can also then come in here and look at the 2 fireplaces in both master bedrooms. The exact same tile, the same technique, really simple. Again, this is as they crossover. If you were to go directly below us now, you're actually in the hallway portion of the house. So this is not the fireplace underneath us. So Heidi, I'll send it back to you, or we send it back over to Fallingwater.
I think we're ready for some questions, if you're both ready. First, I'm going to start with actually both of you. There's a question from S.J. Robinson. Quite a few of Wright homes have had fireplaces that didn't always draw smoke well. Does Westcott or Fallingwater have any problems with the blackening of the bricks or the stone?
There's none here. We imagine it drew pretty well. These are pretty normal flue structures. He gets a little more experimental in some of the later structures as he's creating quite open plans. I imagine this drew really well, but again, we've not had a fire in it. There's probably not been a fire in these fireplaces for 50 years, so tragically.
And Amy, how about you at Fallingwater?
Right. So the only fireplace that we still actively light is the one here in the living room behind me. And as long as the fire is built properly against the back wall and you don't pull it out too far on the grate, it draws beautifully. We've never had any issues. I've not seen any of the fireplaces lit upstairs, so I can't speak to those, but this one is fine.
Great. And Amy, while Kevin's making his way back downstairs, another fireplace question for both of you, but you can get started. Do you do any upkeep on the fireplaces, or what do you do to keep them functioning? Actually, Kevin, it sounds like yours aren't functioning currently,
Ours
so
aren't
maybe this is
functioning,
just a
so,
question
yeah.
for Amy.
That's the advantage. We have no maintenance on them.
Just the basic maintenance that you would do with a fireplace, checking the chimney to make sure that there's not creosote clogging it. And so really that's just the bare minimum things. We also do change our grate because we have a grate that we burn on in the winter, which is in now. That'll come out once we're done with fires, and that the summer grate will go in the spring.
Excellent. Thank you. I actually have some garage questions. I know we're not outside looking at the garage today, but a couple of them. So, Kevin, if you don't mind entertaining some of these questions. One was, they know that Frank Lloyd Wright didn't like basements or garages very much because they accumulate material things, most likely in relation to Usonian's designs. Does Westcott have a basement and or a garage? And I think I know the answer, but go ahead.
It has both, and both are quite large. So the garage is one of the earliest garages you'll find in Springfield, truly one of the earlier ones you'll find in the United States, right? A garage designed around 1906. And the earliest plans, undated plans to the Westcott house, it's labeled as a carriage house. And then in the next set of plans, it becomes a garage, which really shows, I mean, it's more than just language, right? It really says something about the use of the structure. So there was that full carriage house, pretty large structure, as you would need in this period, right? The family had 2 ponies. They produced cars, so they had multiple automobiles. They had a chauffeur who did not live in the carriage house or in the garage, sorry, but still had quarters there in the structure. In Wright's final set of blueprints in 1907, there is no basement in the house. True to form for Frank Lloyd Wright, he did not include a basement, even though this house is built into a hill and it's easy to put a basement into it. He did not include one. But later, as construction was happening, they ended up changing the design and putting a full-length basement in. We would love to know the story behind that, but tragically, I don't think we ever will know how that came about. But it's really nice to have, because as a museum, we use it for all the storage and for kids' tour materials, party supplies, all these various things that we can't just have sitting around corners here at the house.
Great. And Amy, anything you want to add from Fallingwater, whether about storage, and of course you have a garage there as well?
We have, of course, both the basement area, which was included in the design from the beginning, and then when the guest house was added, a carport section was designed there. And it is a really early use of a carport in an American home. We don't know if it's the very first one, but it was a very early use. Today, if you visit, you'll notice that we've closed the front of the carports in, so it almost looks as if it's a garage, but they were just 4 3-sided stalls originally.
Great. We're now on a garage theme, so a couple more questions for Westcott. Did the garage act as a garage and stable at the same time, and did it include a turnaround for the vehicles?
Really good questions. Sounds like these people are fishing, where they've been on a tour and they know this.
Sounds like it.
But so the Westcotts produced automobiles, and they started producing automobiles the same time they were designing this house. And with that transition from their carriage company to an automobile company, they ceased using horse transportation. So they made that change as they moved into this house. They still wanted ponies for the children, so they had 2 pony stalls there, but they were purely recreational, which often horses are in today's society, where previously they were not. Wright designed a turntable for the garage, but it was never installed. It was cut from the final design. There is an X through it on one of the plans. The Westcotts probably saw it as a frivolous expense, considering they were already paying to have a chauffeur, right, who's going to park the cars. That convenience was not necessarily for them, but for their servants. And when push came to shove in budget discussions, they likely decided to cut it.
Great. A couple quick questions about the fireplace grate. We've got one more, and then we're probably going to need to wrap up. But what is the difference between the winter and summer grates? I believe that's for Fallingwater. And then for both of you, were the grates designed by Wright?
Okay, the grates were designed by Wright here at Fallingwater, and they're identical. These grate that we use in the summer looks exactly like the grate that we burn on in the winter. There's no difference. But for the fireplaces upstairs, Wright designed a grate for each of those fireplaces, and they're all just slightly different. They do lift out. There's no ash pit, so you just have to lift the grate out and sweep out the ashes from underneath.
Great. And Westcott, is that Wright designed, the grate?
We don't know. It feels as though it's designed for this space, because how often do you find a fireplace grate that's 3 foot wide and specifically for this really unusual fireplace? I don't think it's in the plans that it actually shows the grate, but you get the sense that an architect, whether Wright or whether a supervising architect, someone had to have put together a design for it. Ours does have an ash, I forget what they're called, the ash disposal area in the back where it would drop down into a lower shaft in the basement.
Excellent. And if you guys don't mind bearing with us, we have one more interesting question. This is a different topic here for Westcott House. Mary Starbuck said the wall treatments in Westcott are interesting. Can you describe them?
Yes, so you notice probably, especially as you go upstairs and you see variations of the color, this is encaustic. It's called encaustic paint, and it's basically wax mixed with paint. It's very unusual type of treatment, especially when you consider all the wall surfaces around this house. It was tremendously taxing for people who actually had to implement that. So we know it actually caused some fires during construction because the painter was struggling to warm the wax on a stove and it caught on fire and he was burned, and it caused them some trouble. But it is throughout the house with the exception of the kitchen and the bathroom.
Thank you. And I'm just putting up in the comments here some links to both of your websites. Everybody, don't forget that the reason why we started Wright Virtual Visits was so we could support all of our public sites when COVID first hit. But of course, we also need support. So if you're inspired to make a donation or learn more about programs or tours, please go to those websites. Do either of you have any special programs coming up that you want to talk about real quick?
Well, I believe you guys are closed right now.
Yeah. Westcott's still closed.
Yes, and we are closed. Our grounds are open for winter walks, but starting in February, we'll be starting our virtual program called A Closer Look, and that's on Wednesdays at 1 o'clock, and it's a different theme each week. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about some specific things about Fallingwater, take a look at our website, and there's a description of each session.
Yeah, we were closed just for a couple of weeks in January, but we are reopening next week, and we are gearing toward our next virtual lecture series, and we got some federal grant funding that will allow us to continue some of the virtual outreach, which has been just wonderful to work on. And the tours are here, and it's such a great thing to actually plan to visit this house and then head to Fallingwater, because we are just about 3.5 hours apart. So
I think it's the closest public site, even though it's a bit of a distance, a little further than the Chicago sites are from each other. But it's thankfully one of the most famous works of architecture in the world happens to be our neighbor, so to speak, 3.5, 4 hours away.
Great. Well, thank you all once again for these excellent tours of the fireplaces and talking about garages and all the other questions that were answered. I just wanted to remind everyone that all of the episodes will continue to be archived. The ones from 1.0, 2.0, and now 3.0 are archived on the Frank Lloyd Wright Building Conservancy's website, which is savewright.org/WVV. Please tune in next month on February the 10th. All of the Wright virtual visits, for the most part, moving forward, will be on the second Thursday of the month. We're still figuring out exactly our theme and the sites, but we'll be announcing those soon on our Facebook page. And one last link, pardon me as I look away from the screen. We have 10 hours of Fallingwater Fireplace as a gift to you that I'm putting in the comments. If you are interested in having a screensaver just staring at the warm Fallingwater fireplace, that's there for you in the comments as well. So right now what we're going to do is before we leave for the day, I just want to encourage you to hang on for one more quick minute. We have a great slideshow of some of the Frank Lloyd Wright design fireplaces that you submitted. So on our way out, just like to say thanks once again on behalf of the whole team, and we look forward to seeing you next month, and stay tuned for the slideshow.